everyone, and welcome to the Chief Science Officer Zoom In on Science calls, where we learn about STEM professionals and their careers to understand the impact of their job in modern day life. I'm CSO Saiba, and I'm from Michigan. Today, I'm going to be hosting the call, and so for all of us to enjoy this experience, I can see that you've already all muted your microphones, and when you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. And we'll be sure to have plenty of time after the Google Slides to answer the question. On past science calls, to keep us engaged during the quarantine, we've had many different scientists come in and teach us about their jobs. Today, we have Sandhiya, and she is a chemical engineer from New York. Sandhiya, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your work? I know that you have some slides, so you can use the share screen button at the bottom toolbar.
Sure, thanks, Saiba. Hi, everyone. I'm Sandhya. It's really good to meet you all and connect, and thanks for joining in. I'm really excited to talk to you a little bit about what I do. So let me try to get this screen sharing going. Okay, I think that should be fine. You can see it okay? Okay, great. So my name is Sandhya. Just to let you know, currently, so I work for Johnson & Johnson in their consumer products division in research and development. So I'm a scientist working on products for skin health. Just a little bit background about myself. So right now I live in New Jersey. My family is from New York, Long Island specifically. So the whole New York, New Jersey area is where I've been around a lot. Prior to this, before I was at Johnson & Johnson, I was actually at Revlon and Elizabeth Arden in their skincare department doing research and development as well. My education before that, I went to Columbia University at their School of Engineering. I got my master's in chemical engineering, and my undergraduate was at Stony Brook University, where I got my bachelor's in chemical and molecular engineering and specialized in nanotechnology and astronomy. So a lot of different areas, but I was really passionate about chemical engineering, so that's kind of what I stuck with and did my master's in, and my career now too is a lot of that. Some other things about myself, I know that some of you, and I'm talking to Saiba in the past, are involved in Science Olympiad. So I was very involved in high school and Science Olympiad, and while I was in college, I continued to work with my high school as a alumni mentor for some of the students on the team. So that was always a huge part of my life when I was in high school. And I've also worked a lot with the American Institute of Chemical Engineers and the Tau Beta Pi Engineering Honor Society. So I work right now to mentor students who are interested in STEM, interested in science or research. So that's something I'm always super excited about. So it's a little bit about me. And later on, I know that you were saying if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. So if you have any questions later about any of these specific things about my background, let me know. So to get into a little bit of what I do now and what I was doing at Revlon and what I do now at Johnson & Johnson, I'm a scientist in skin health research. So I develop skincare products that are necessary to target certain areas of skin health. So we either are looking, mostly in skincare, we're looking at like creams or ointments, lotions, cleansers that would target specific skin concerns, redness, acne, any different areas that could fall into those type of concerns. But the main two components, I guess, or the two halves of the work that I do is between developing formulations that could actually be a product. So when you're thinking about things you see on the shelves, like right now, brands that fall under J&J would be like Neutrogena, Aveeno, like these brands that you see all the time, and they have skincare products you would see on the shelf in a store. But what kind of products are they? That area is one part of my research that I work on. So typically, just to give you a little bit of information, skincare products are usually emulsions. So they're a combination, like a cream or a moisturizer might be an emulsion-based formula, which means that, like what you see in the diagram on the left, it's a combination of water and oil and some different ingredients, which are emulsifiers, which help them combine. So what an emulsion really is that normally, you know, if you mix water and oil, they're immiscible. They're not able to mix together and they would form separate layers. The emulsifier helps the two combine and stay in a stable form that isn't going to fall apart. So if you look at something like salad dressing, that doesn't really have a stable form because when you leave it out for a while, the layers will separate again. So my goal as a scientist in skin health is to develop formulas that are stable and that you leave them on your shelf, and if you're using a cream, it's not going to fall apart and get all watery or runny after some time. So part of the work I do is making sure that we have good formulas that are safe to use on your skin, safe to have a shelf life, that they won't fall apart, and that they stay stable so that they help you with whatever skincare need you have, but they still work. The other half of what I do is developing ingredients and doing research on specific skincare ingredients that could help your skin. People have a lot of different skincare concerns like pigmentation or having spots, dark spots, different things like that. And especially we do a lot of work with aging skin and wrinkles. So something on the bottom is like an example of some of the experiments I do where we develop certain acids or certain ingredients that we could use in our formulas and test them out to see if they're gentle enough for the skin and if they work. So this was an experiment I was doing earlier in the year using one of these patented acids that we have and seeing how it would affect a flower petal to make sure that it's gentle enough to use for sensitive skin. So we put it in water, we put it in our acid, and we put it in lemon juice. That's a natural acid that's pretty strong to see how we can compare it. And the one in our acid didn't affect the flower at all, whereas the lemon juice broke it down a little bit. So the same kind of principles of scientific method that you would have learned in school, the same kind of things are what we apply in the lab. So that's some of the kind of research we do where we're trying to develop new ingredients and patent new things that could be really important to the world of skincare. So I had a little video to show you just what I filmed in the lab one day of making a formula. So what we're doing is a lot like cooking. We're weighing out different ingredients, waxes and oils, moisturizing ingredients, heating up our water, like I said, so we get them to a high temperature, something that can mix together and form that emulsion. Then we mix the water ingredients with the oil phase ingredients together. And we use this device called a homogenizer, which is kind of just like a mixer, but it goes at very high speed. And that's what helps mix the two of them together and turn them into just not going from two separate liquids into creamy. So this was a hand cream that I was making in the lab, and then I poured it into a jar so you can kind of see what that looked like in the end. And we also, just for testing in the lab, will sometimes pour them into little tubes and use this crimping machine to crimp. So you kind of get to see a start to finish of raw materials all the way to a finished cream in a tube. So we go from end to end when we're doing stuff in the lab. So it's kind of cool because you see things on the shelves and you never really know what the process is that goes into making them. So that was just a little video I took one day while I was in lab to show you guys. Next, okay. So I wanted to talk about some of the research I did during my master's and my undergrad while I was in college. So I have always been really passionate about chemical engineering and also about astronomy. The reason I went into chemical engineering, the field, I was always very passionate about chemistry. I liked the class a lot when I took it in high school. And engineering to me was my interest in finding solutions to problems. And engineers really take the time to use the science, use the physics, and apply what they learned to come up with solutions and put things together that can solve problems in the world. So chemical engineering was an area that I really liked, and I was doing research in that, but I've also really always been interested in astronomy and astrophysics. So I studied that while I was in college as well. And I wanted to show you guys something of a cool opportunity I had to combine chemical engineering and astrophysics. So this was a research program I did at Princeton University one summer while I was in college. We were looking at this problem that came to us from a laboratory in Italy. They're called the Borexino Laboratory, and they have a detector for neutrinos, which are these really small particles that come from the radiation from the sun. So they're trying to detect solar neutrinos coming from the sun that are striking the Earth And in order to detect those particles, they have this detector they built in a mountain called Gran Sasso in Italy, 1.5 kilometers deep in the rocks. So they built this detector there in order to get away from all of the noise and the other things going on in the atmosphere that would mess up their experiment. And they thought being so far deep, they would be able to detect those neutrinos. But they kept getting these other signals coming from radioactive material in the water they were using in their plant, in their the detector, the little round gray thing you see. So they came to us at Princeton and they came to the astronomy and chemical engineering departments together and said, can you build some kind of a device that'll help us purify the water that we use in that detector, get rid of the radioactive material that none of our normal purification methods are able to get rid of. And can you build that for us? And then we'll build the same thing over in Italy and see if it helps us and makes it work to find the neutrinos. So that was a really cool project I got to do because it was both. I got to do astronomy related things and chemical engineering. So the structure you see in the middle was what I built over the course of the summer. And when I say built, I mean, we had a glass blower on campus. I had to learn how to solder. I had wrenches and I put it all together. So that was real engineering experience. And it was really cool to build it and see how it kind of just, it's a distillation apparatus, which means it boils water in certain temperatures and really specific ways to help get rid of these certain materials that are in the water that we don't want. So I built this, and then we were able to, over the course of that summer I was there, test it by running some chemical experiments. That's what you see in this top hexagon here, to filter our water out after it went through the filter system I built, and see if we were able to get rid of that radioactive material in the water that they didn't need for the detector in Italy. So these little bricks here were kind of our own mini version of that detector. We built it and put these lead bricks around it to make it similar to how theirs was buried under all those rocks. And then we had these little circles at the bottom were discs where we tried to show what the water was like before and after it was purified. So the left is actually after it was purified, the right was before. So you're able to see that all of those little minerals, the radioactive material in that water, we were able to get rid of it completely. And when they ran the tests, they were able to see that it kept them from getting those extra results they didn't need in their detector. So we had to then teach them how to build it over there in Italy and mail them all these parts they couldn't make. And it was a really cool project. And now over there in Italy in that lab, they're using this machine that I built. So it's really cool to kind of find ways of doing science that combine everything you're interested in. You never know where it'll take you. So that was just a really interesting project I had that I wanted to share with you. But that's everything I had for my presentation. So I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for telling us. We have a couple questions inside the chat, but first, I did come with 2 questions beforehand. So the first one is, who was your mentor as a child to encourage you to become an engineer?
Definitely. So having mentors is always super important. And if you can find them in a teacher, in someone you know who's already working, like a family friend or adult, someone you know who's already working, that can be great. For me, I think, like I mentioned, how Science Olympiad was important to me, other than just enjoying being a part of it, it was my biology teacher in high school who was our school advisor for Science Olympiad. And so I would see her in biology class, and I'd also see her in Science Olympiad after school. And she really inspired me to keep pursuing the science that I was interested in. After Science Olympiad, we would sit down and we would talk about interesting scientific developments together that were going on. So she always encouraged me and motivated me to follow my passion. So I think having someone like that is really helpful.
And then the next question that we have is, what advice would you give to your 14-year-old self?
So I think that the best advice I would give myself is to not listen when people say that what you're interested in might not work or might not go together. I know that when kids are little, if you talk to a little kid, like I'm saying 5, 6, and you ask them what they want to be when they grow up, they list out like 10 things in a row. Like, I want to be an archaeologist, I want to work in a zoo, I want to be a princess, I want to be a ballerina. And I think when we get older, we kind of narrow that down and say, okay, I can really only do one thing. But kind of keeping in mind that you can, if you really want to do many things, there's a way to do that, and just follow your passions and don't think that you have to limit yourself just because of what sounds reasonable or what people tell you is the right thing to do. So just dare to dream about whatever you want and find a way to get to it.
Thank you very much. Now we have a couple questions from the participants. The first one is from CSO Dania from Mexico. She said a while back there was a YouTuber who said that she did not like chemicals, so she would not make homemade scrubs. Is it bad to make scrubs at home?
So as a chemical engineer, the main thing that we all always are really passionate about getting out to people, the concept of chemicals as a bad thing, because water is a chemical. Like anything that's made up of elements, right, is a chemical compound. And there are plenty of chemical compounds found in nature. There are some that you make in the lab, but it's especially in the skincare field, you hear a lot of people talking about, oh, don't use this, they use chemicals and they're fake, or use this because it's all natural. But it's really important to consider that it's not just about whether an ingredient is not organic or natural, or if it's a chemical, but what the actual combination of things will do. So scrubs that you can make at home versus, just to answer that specifically, one thing is that the way like I was saying about stability, maybe your scrub will work if you just do something like sugar and something like, I'm all for doing homemade skincare too. But as a long-term thing, you'll see that some of these formulas that you make at home and that people make at home or give recipes for won't stay stable over time. They might break down, they might have a different chemical reaction than you intend, and then you put that on your skin and you'll see something else happening that you didn't want to happen. So I'd say always just be careful with those kinds of things, and consider the fact that, you can see all of the ingredients written on the back of any product you look at. So if you really want to know what is in them, look it up, and there's easy ways to see what each of those do. And I promise they're all in there for a reason. Like, our goal as scientists in skincare is to minimize we want our ingredient listing to be as short as possible, but sometimes you need to add extra things just because that's how it'll help it stay stable and not break down, fall apart, or do something bad to your skin. So I hope that answered.
And then we have Kelly from CSO International was wondering, other than when we were talking about role models earlier, other than that, was there anything else that motivated you to engage in STEM?
I think, school is good in that regard, like having good teachers, and if you're passionate about what you're learning in school, that can help. But separate from that, just doing a lot of your own reading and things like that. And it's even easier nowadays than it was maybe when I was little. Like, I used to have this book, it was called like the Big Book of Knowledge or something. It was like this big, and it was just full of science facts. So whenever I was bored or I had time, or if we had to go to the doctor office and I was sitting in the waiting room or something, I would just be reading through that. And then YouTube, and there's all these online like video series and different things like that you can look at now. So if you're interested, I think staying motivated to engage in science, if you're interested in a subject, you can find so many like free, easy to access resources online to learn more about it and go deeper into that topic. So I think that's something that's super important and can help you learn more about that topic and get engaged in it until you're actually able to study it and go work in that field. It's not just about doing it yourself, but also just learning as much as you can. So I would say that's important.
Thank you. And I'm sorry if I pronounced this name wrong, but CSO Fatma from Kenya was asking if there were any ups and downs along the way of like your career, and if so, how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think I remember, I think Saiba, you and I talked about it at one point, like it's also like an obvious thing that you hear about a lot, like being a woman in STEM, and it's getting better over the years. Like when I was in high school, I was one of 3 girls in my AP physics class. And so at that point, we just kind of all stuck together and we're doing our thing. But then as you get like over time, things are definitely, there's a lot of support for that. So in college, I was part of this group called Women in Science and Engineering. And we had a program where we would mentor, like I was in my third year of college and we would mentor first year students. So nowadays there's a lot of support and resources for that. So I think staying encouraged, even if you're not in the majority of whatever field you are, whether it's because of race, gender, and nationality, anything like that, not feeling like you're alone, because there are a lot of clubs, there's a lot of groups that offer support when you're in high school, when you're in college, and in the workplace. At Johnson & Johnson right now, I'm part of a WISE, like a Women in Science and Engineering group, and we partner with robotics teams in all the local high schools, and we help support them and go to their meetings. So there are always a lot of things that can help you along the way. So I think, not getting down on yourself when you are one of a few people doing something, but feeling more like now you're a pioneer, and what can you do to turn around and help the next person who's coming into that field and feeling alone.
Thank you. And Dania from Mexico was also asking, what do you think about microneedling?
So there are a lot of different, so I work in skincare formulations, specifically like creams, like moisturizers. We work on using active ingredients that help with the biological pathways in your skin. So if there's something like a bacteria that's causing it, or if it's a certain 2 layers of skin down, this cell is causing this skin problem, then we work on targeting things like that. When you look at a lot of these physical kind of skincare treatments, like microneedling, dermabrasion, there's a lot of these things coming up. I would say just do your research would be the most important thing. Some methods of it definitely have science behind them and work. Some things not as much. So I would say doing research about any specific skincare practice you're following and learning about it and making sure that it makes sense before you try it out. I'd say that is what I would say about any of those separate skincare things.
Yeah, it's definitely. And we also have CSO Tira from Arizona asking, throughout your journey of school and working at your job, what is one piece of advice that you gave to yourself to help you succeed?
So I'd say maybe two things instead. So I know you asked for one, but I'll give two. So one, I would say just staying organized. I always like I said, how I said you can do everything you're interested in. That was kind of how I lived my college life. I did everything I was interested in. I was president of 3 clubs and a mentor and doing a major and double minor, but just you can do it all if you stay organized. So I'd say make sure you find what system works for you to keep on top of all of your work. And to go along with that, make time for fun. Even if the work you're doing is fun and you're passionate about it, make time. There's always time for doing things that are just fun and helping yourself take your mind off of things that are stressful. So I think that's super important, whether it's playing an instrument or spending time with friends, make time for it. And there's never no time for that. You can always make time for that.
Yeah, that's definitely really good advice, because it can definitely help lower stress. We also have, and I'm not sure if I'll pronounce this name right, but CSO Danushia from Kenya was asking, were people discouraging you when you came up with an idea to be implemented? And if so, did you overcome them?
Yeah, definitely. And I think in college and in work and everything, you'll see working in teams that you don't necessarily choose yourself, that's all the time, everywhere. That's constantly happening. And there's always going to be differences of opinion. So sometimes you put out an idea and people are like, no, that's probably not going to work. You shouldn't try it. We should do this instead. But I think good communication is super important. Making sure that you voice any concerns you have. Don't let anyone take away your voice. So when you're in a group or when you're in any kind of setting where there are people just kind of dismissing your idea or just talking it over, make sure that your opinions and your thoughts on the matter are out there. Don't be afraid that people will discourage you, and don't even instead of not even saying the idea, say it. If people discourage you, talk to them and see how you can understand their reasons for why they think it's a bad idea. Let them understand your reasons for why you think it's a good idea and talk it through. That's what I always say. Like, don't be afraid to communicate clearly and directly. Usually when that happens, people will find the best way to make a compromise. Either they realize that your idea makes sense, or you realize that your idea would be better off if you maybe tweaked it in some way and came to a compromise. So just be direct and talk to whoever you're working with.
That's really good advice. We do have one more question. Hope from CSO International asked, what was the most impactful or coolest project that you ever worked on?
I mean, I think I really liked the one that I talked about that I did at Princeton, because it was just really cool too. We had these video calls with the scientists at the labs in Italy, and they would be like, okay, we put this piece here, show us yours, and where did you put your piece? Okay, and it was just a really cool kind of collaborative project that was a lot of fun to see people from astronomy, people from astrophysics, people from chemical engineering and mechanical engineering in different countries all come together to work on a project. So I think that was one of my favorite things I've worked on.
Thank you very much. If there's anyone else that has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box.
Yeah, and if you think of them later, I think, I don't know if you guys usually do this or not, but Zaiba has my email address too, so feel free to contact me if you have any questions about anything or what I'm working on or what I've worked on.
We just want to say thank you so much. I'm so happy that you were able to be on, and we're just going to roll right into the ending. We're at our time, so go ahead and wrap it up.
Thank you very much for your participation today. But before we close up this call, we do have one final question. What advice would you give to us as young leaders for our future?
I think by already being a part of a program like this and stepping up and doing things like this, you're already on the right track. Being in these kind of leadership positions is super helpful, just learning how to work with people. So I'd say keep looking for things like that, and keep looking for opportunities to do science and learn more, especially like when you're in high school. There's a lot of high school programs and things like that that you can participate in. So I'd say keep learning, keep working with other people, and you never know where an opportunity is going to come from. So just keep an eye out and don't dismiss anything as like, oh, that's probably not going to amount to anything. You never know where something will come from.
Thank you. And again, we really enjoyed having you with us today. You are a really great inspiration for a lot of us, and we hope that maybe later in the future we can do more calls as we did today. And now, if everyone would please unmute themselves, and so we can do the CSO motto. CSOs, don't just hope it happens.
Make it happen.
happen.
Thank you so much. You did a great job of facilitating, Sahiba, so excellent work. And let's all go ahead and say goodbye. Thanks for joining us for another Zoom In on Science call. Bye, everybody.
Bye.